This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Today's video is a follow-up from yesterday's video. So my suggestion, if you didn't see yesterday's video, I highly recommend you stop this one and go back and watch the first one. Because after doing the video and reading everyone's comments, a few light bulbs went off. I'll be honest, this video was the video to really hurt my brain. Because yesterday you guys asked some really great questions that prompted me to ask additional questions in trying to find and seek answers to what the actual truth is. So grab a yummy snack and cozy beverage and get comfortable because I'm about to show you some things that's going to really make you think. But before I do, I kindly ask if you could help the kid out and hit that like button. It's always helpful to this channel to help get the visibility so more people are aware of the shenanigans going on. I truly do appreciate it. Let's begin. So when we circle back to the judgment that came down by Justice Vancourt on June 27, 2024, he writes, "One of the most important issues at trial, on which the burden will lie on Prince Harry, will be whether he did not know and could not, by the use of reasonable diligence, have found out enough about the remaining allegations of unlawful information gathering to appreciate before September 2013 that he had a worthwhile claim against NGN." So the argument here with NGN is that, look, he knew about it. If the hacking was so severe and intrusive, why didn't he take action back then? Why now when it's literally too late? So the excuse that Harry used last year in the court to make his claim for this being justified was saying that the Duke described for the first time how in about 2012 he was informed by either a lawyer acting on behalf of the royal family or a senior employee at Buckingham Palace of a secret agreement between the palace and senior executives of NGN's parent company, which was to the effect that senior members of the royal family should not bring phone hacking claims against NGN at that stage and should wait and issue them after the MTVIL was concluded, when NGN would apologize to the affected royals and pay compensation. Also said the Duke now relies on this secret agreement to contend that NGN is a stop from relying on a defense of limitation. He contends that he relied on the secret agreement in 2012 and on negotiations being conducted afterwards between the two camps by not bringing a phone hacking claim against NGN when he otherwise would have done so. Prior to service of the Duke's witness statement in March of 2023, his pleaded case had been that until about 2018, when he was married to Meghan, he was unaware that he had a phone hacking claim to bring, and his case relied on NGN's deliberate concealment of relevant facts to delay time running against him. If you're like me, you know that this is complete and utter BS. The big issue that came out of this judgment, as we all know, was the discovery of Prince Harry destroying not only files, but drafts of spare and any type of messaging or signal messaging that they had, and had confirmed to his lawyers who presented it in the court that he did not have any type of chat or conversation about unlawful information gathering with anyone, as well as the ghostwriter, which now catches Prince Harry undoubtedly in this big fat lie. So when you go back to this beautiful essay that J.R. Moehringer put together in defense of Prince Harry and working with him, you start to now see the lies start to unfold and what really was going on here in this memoir. Even the cover of this gives Prince Harry away, as it says, "Notes from Prince Harry's ghostwriter." Collaborating on his memoir Spare meant spending hours together on Zoom, meeting his inner circle, and gaining a new perspective on the tabloids. Excuse me? What? Anyhow, when you look back at this, it incriminates Harry further in this massive scam that's going on. So how many of us put two and two together that Prince Harry started writing Spare almost immediately after he and the wife Mexited? Literally. So as it says here, going back to this opinion essay that was written. J.R. Moehringer writes, and then in the summer of 2020, I got a text, the familiar query. Would you be interested in speaking with someone about ghosting a memoir? I shook my head no. I covered my eyes. I picked up the phone and heard myself blurting, who? Prince Harry. Further down, he writes, and noting that in the early stages of a global pandemic, it was impossible to predict when I'd be able to sit down with Harry in the same room. How do you write about someone you can't meet? And he says, Harry had no deadline, however, and that enticed me. Many authors are in a hot hurry, and some ghosts are happy to oblige. They churn and burn, producing 3 or 4 books a year. I go painfully slow. I don't know any other way. Also, I just like the dude. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I want people to fully understand that as soon as he left the royal family, he had these things in the works. And he began writing a memoir already. None of us knew about it at the time because they didn't disclose that until the following year when they made the announcement in July of 2021, where Harry signed a 4-book deal with Penguin Random House. And they indicated that one of those books would not be released until after the Queen has passed away. A little fun fact, it just so happens that J.R. Moehringer's wife, Shannon Welch, went over to Penguin Random House around the same time Harry signed these deals. So looking at where she came from, which was Harper One, and who was Harper One? Harper One belongs to HarperCollins. HarperCollins is the one that published Finding Freedom. Yeah, you see how everybody's connected to one another? Finding Freedom is the book that keeps on giving. And when you take a look at how did Harry get in contact with J.R. Moehringer, well, there was a way. Absolutely. And then looking at when Shannon Welch, J.R. Moehringer's wife, ended up moving over to Penguin Random House, and then Harry signs this 4-book deal, you start to figure out what's really going on here. So getting back to this essay that I truly believe that was written to clap back for Harry because of the backlash at the time from Spare and all the lies that were being told, he writes, Harry and I made steady progress in the course of 2020, largely because the world didn't know what we were up to. That's because Meghan and Harry are shady and sneaky. We could revel in the privacy of our Zoom bubble. As Harry grew to trust me, he brought other people into the bubble. Would David Sherborne be one of them? Or Meghan Markle? Connecting me with his inner circle, a vital phase in every ghosting job. There's always someone who knows your author's life better than he does, and your task is to find that person fast and interview his, or in this case, her, socks off. As the pandemic waned, I was finally able to travel to Montecito. I went once with my wife, Shannon Welch, and children. I also went twice by myself. Harry put me up in his guest house where Meghan and Archie would visit me on their afternoon walks, so I'm assuming little Betty hadn't been purchased yet. Meghan, knowing I was missing my family, was forever bringing trays of food and sweets, and you know that Meghan made him put that in there. Little by little, Harry and I amassed hundreds of thousands of words. When we weren't Zooming or phoning, we were texting around the clock. In due time, no subject was off the table. Oh, you don't say. I felt honored by his candor, and I could tell that he felt astonished by it and energized. While I always emphasized storytelling and scenes, Harry couldn't escape the wish that Spare might be a rebuttal to every lie ever published about him. After listening to this, it sure sounds like Prince Harry had been in constant communication with J.R. Moehringer. And if Prince Harry doesn't have any record of those communications, then I'm pretty sure J.R. Moehringer has them, and it can be retrieved. I also want to point out that in the beginning of this opinion piece, J.R. Moehringer starts off with talking about an argument that he had with Prince Harry, and it was over how the story was being told when he was doing some military exercise and there was a simulated kidnapping and how they treated him. And at one point, towards the end of it, something was said about his mom, Diana. And he writes, although this wasn't the first time that Harry and I had argued, it felt different. It felt as if we were hurtling towards some kind of decisive rupture, in part because Harry was no longer saying anything. He was just glaring into the camera. Finally, he exhaled and calmly explained that all his life people had belittled his intellectual capabilities, and this flash of cleverness proved that even after being kicked and punched and deprived of sleep and food, he had his wits about him. Oh, I said, okay, it made sense now, but I still refuse. And Harry's like, why? Now listen closely here to what is being said, and I'll tell you why this matters. Because I told him, everything you just said is about you. You want the world to know that you did a good job, that you were smart. But, strange as it may seem, memoir isn't about you. It's not even the story of your life. It's a story carved from your life, a particular series of events chosen because they have the greatest resonance for the widest range of people. And at this point in the story, those people don't need to know anything more than your captors said a cruel thing about your mom. Subconsciously, we know that many aspects of this book Spare have some mistruths or lies, I would say. But when you hear him say exactly that this is not even the story of your life, when Harry toted up and down that it was the story of his life and what really happened, you then start to realize that the way that this was written was to tailor to various audiences. And in my opinion, paint a picture surrounding Harry's love for Meghan and the tabloids and how they treated him, giving away little clues as to help with his court cases. But he screws himself because Meghan had to write another book with Omid Scobie in Finding Freedom that shows just how deceitful these two were when these lawsuits were being filed. Like, when you really think about it, in the book Spare, Harry makes it a point to talk about when and where he met David Sherborne. As if, like, David Sherborne is important to Harry's life. Well, he is now because of these lawsuits. Now watch how this part was written to now fit this lawsuit and narrative around Harry wasn't able to do anything with the palace because there was this so-called secret agreement. He writes, this is September 2019, it was partially down to Elton and David. At the end of our recent visit, they introduced us to a barrister, an acquaintance of theirs, a lovely fellow who knew more about the phone hacking scandal than anyone I'd ever met. He'd share with me his expertise, plus loads of open court evidence. And when I told him I wish there was something I could do with it, when I complained that we'd been blocked at every turn by the palace, he offered a breathtakingly elegant workaround. Why not hire your own lawyer? I stammered. You mean, are you telling me we could just... What a thought. It never occurred to me. I've been so conditioned to do as I was told. Since these are J.R. Moringer's words, I'm sure NGN will be contacting him to find out the notes surrounding this little passage. If I were them, I would also ask who else was on these Zoom calls and having conversation. Because clearly, when the pandemic was in full gear, how many people were really involved with Prince Harry on this book? For the most part of 2020, nobody knew that they were writing this book. So who were on these Zoom calls, right? So now when you look at this now all of a sudden becomes the perfect alibi for Prince Harry saying, I didn't know anything until recently that I could do something about it. I was told not to touch it because there's this secret agreement in place. So now Finding Freedom becomes the gift that keeps on giving. You know, the book that Meghan and Harry adamantly denied they had anything to do with it. Also the email between Harry and Jason Knopf with Harry saying we must be able to say we had nothing to do with it. Well, this is coming right back to bite them. Now, I've talked about this before, but I think it's important to bring it back up. Per the court documents, this lawsuit was filed on September 27, 2019. Okay, so this aligns with what Spare says in September 2019. They were in Africa. Now, watch this manipulation. Scobie writes, though the smiles on their faces at public engagements had been consistent through their departure, the weeks leading up to their Air Canada flight from London Heathrow's airport in mid-November were anything but cheerful. Having recently launched lawsuits against 3 British tabloids for invasion of privacy and phone hacking allegations, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex seem more a target of press than ever. Now pay attention to this. Although Harry didn't announce them with the news of Meghan's lawsuit, he had also filed lawsuits at the same time against The Sun and The Mirror regarding their alleged illegal interception of his voicemail messages between 2001 and 2005. Though the royals traditionally used lawyers at Harbottle and Lewis, Harry and Meghan wanted to keep their legal proceedings separate and away from prying eyes within Buckingham Palace, where they had been advised not to take legal action, so they enlisted Clintons for him and Shillings, the UK's leading law firm in defamation and media-related cases, for her. The Duchess's lawyers, who included barrister David Sherborne, who once represented Princess Diana, were prepared, setting out an extensive list of false and absurd stories to highlight a pattern of mistruths. So here's what I want to point out to everyone. At the time when this was going on with Meghan, Harry filed his 2 lawsuits, not saying a word. Why? Also, if David Sherborne was representing Harry, why wasn't it included here? They just happened to mention his name, but chose not to say that he was representing both Harry and Meghan? Also, they point out the fact that they went to Buckingham Palace to see what they could do, and he had been advised not to take legal action. So why did he go to Buckingham Palace if he already knew that there was a secret agreement in place and not to take action, and now he wanted to take action? Do you see how this story is all falling apart right now? Because when this book was published, it was published in August of 2020. Because these two are such liars, they end up giving themselves away because they can't keep their story straight. So Omid continues to write, Harry and Meghan's lawsuits were different from anything in palace history, or at least how they went about the process. An announcement of this sort was usually issued in formal correspondence on palace email and then hosted on royal.uk, the official royal family website. Further down, he says, changes to procedures at London's High Court starting on October 1st would have meant their cases would have been heard in a division with judges who tended to side with publishers. Sources confirm that Harry and Meghan's lawyers rushed the lawsuits out at the end of September in an effort to keep the case before a more privacy-friendly division. Both were incredibly nervous, a source said. I'm sure Meghan and Harry, they needed to go in strong. Whatever the reason for its timing, Harry was determined for the statement to make uncomfortable reading for many members of the press, including those in Africa with him. The prince said he was tired of playing the game in which royals trade exclusives with the tabloids in exchange for some peace and privacy. He was also sick of the hypocrisy of the media outlets that glorified Meghan one day and tore her down the next. One thing that I think NGN missed here is that if they are looking to see the communication between Harry and his ghostwriter, then they should equally be looking at communication between Omid Scobie and the palace. Because remember, he was communicating with Jason Knopf. So who is this source that said that they were both incredibly nervous? Why were they incredibly nervous? And why did they fail to not mention that Harry, too, was also suing? Because when these were filed, they were filed like a day within each other. Now, this is just my opinion, but the way that this looks, not too good for David Sherborne, but it does look that there is an intention to deceive the court. And when we look at what Scobie had written, like, why did they choose two law firms? If they wanted to just get away from the prying eyes of Buckingham Palace, why did they feel the need to go with two law firms? My guess would be to throw the scent off, to keep focus on Meghan and her court case while Harry and David Sherborne behind the scenes continue this grift. Because I truly believe their expectation when they filed this, that the newspaper was going to bend over and say, we're going to settle and issue out some payout, because this is what has been happening. So when you look at how this situation was set up, it was very sneaky and deceptive. And also for Omid Scobie to make the point that Harry didn't announce his lawsuit, but Meghan did, even though they share the same barrister? Why? Don't you see that a little bit suspicious? I've come to the conclusion, after looking at all of this, that it was done on purpose to not announce Prince Harry's lawsuits at the time and to focus on Meghan, because they couldn't look like David Sherborne was in collusion in getting these lawsuits together at the same time. I mean, also to have two separate law firms represent practically the same thing didn't make any kind of sense. So now when you see this being done on the down low and then it being written here that the reason why that they filed so quickly and at the same time, in my opinion, is Scobie covering tracks for both Meghan and Harry on this plan. You know, when you go back to Spare, and it was perfectly crafted in saying that David Sherborne made this genius suggestion for him to get his own lawyer. What a novel concept. But here in Finding Freedom, they went to the palace and they weren't going to help them. So they went on their own and didn't bother to tell Buckingham Palace that they were doing this. And the final question or point that I'd like to make is that how could Harry and Meghan go to the palace to discuss suing these newspapers and them being turned down when they didn't even meet David yet, for David to show Harry that here is this open case evidence and you can sue, and I'm going to give you this genius idea now to go hire your own lawyer. In my opinion, and this is just based off of the observations that I've made in these court cases, is that David Sherborne knows how to take advantage of the system. And he has done quite a few of these court cases against Rupert Murdoch's empire, along with, what's his name, Graham Johnson from Byline Investigates, the whole seedy group. I truly believe that this is a grift that was concocted with Prince Harry to get the newspaper to settle. David Sherborne has been successful in getting the newspapers to give settlements on phone hacking when that was a big deal and they were found guilty. So I do think that this was another grift, in my opinion, where they saw Prince Harry could be another candidate to possibly swindle the newspaper out of more money and get a settlement. But I don't think that they expected the Sun newspaper to say, you know what? We're going to challenge this. We're not going to lay down and let you walk all over us anymore. It was probably like, we're being taken advantage of. Screw it. Let the courts decide and let's go through the process, which is something I don't think they had expected. And now what we're seeing as they go through this legal process, there's so many holes in Harry's story that it's falling apart. Particularly now with this destruction of evidence between Harry's ghostwriter and him when he was writing Spare. But as you can see, there would be a reason as to why he would have to destroy that kind of evidence, only if there was discussion pertaining of what to put in the book surrounding meeting David Sherborne. You see what I'm saying? So I truly believe that this is what is going on, but hey, they need to now look at Omid Scobie and get that info as well, because there are now conflicting stories, and we know that Harry and Meghan were also engaged with Omid Scobie when Finding Freedom came out. So that's all I have for you today. I know that this was a lot, but I hope you see where my head was following all of this and what I had been seeing, but definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.